A pretty common question that we get in our storyline basic training is what's the difference between some of the states? Specifically, what's the difference between a visited state and a selected state? And they do somewhat similar things. A visited state appears when the learner clicks on an object with their cursor or if they select it with their keyboard. Once an object has been visited, it has been visited. You can't turn it off unless you add a trigger to the slide to somehow reset it to its initial state. On the other hand, a selected state also appears when the learner clicks on something, but if they click on that same object again, it will go back to its normal state. So if you want a learner to see what objects they've selected and give them the object to deselect things, then you can use that selected state. Let's look at a couple of common examples of how each of these states are used. So we'll preview this entire project, and we'll first look at the visited state. So these three buttons all have a normal state, a hover state, and a visited state on them. And once I click on Show Layer 1, that button is in its visited state. I can click on it again, it's not going to go back to the normal state. When I show Layer 2, that button is now in its visited state. And because visited states are often used to control navigation, if I try and move forward, I'm going to see an error layer telling me that I have to view all the items before I can move on. Once all three buttons are in their visited state, then I can click on that next button and move on to my next slide. If we look back at that, all I've done is added those states to each of the buttons, so normal state, visited, and hover. And on my player trigger, I have a condition to jump to the next slide when the user clicks or swipes next, as long as the state of buttons 1, 2, and 3 are all visited. Otherwise, we have an else condition there that is going to show the error layer telling the user that they have to view all the items before moving forward. On the other hand, with the selected state, when we click on something, it does show some information. I just put some text into the selected state of that button, and I can turn these on and turn them back off. So I can toggle these selected states on and off by clicking on them and showing or not showing that information. A more commonly used application of the selected state would be to allow the learner to make some kind of choices. So this is just a little example where the user is going to pick what they want on their pizza. So this is why we would use selected as opposed to something like visited. If I say that I want pepperoni and then later change my mind and I want to deselect pepperoni, I wouldn't want to use a visited state for that because I wouldn't be able to turn it off. So by using the selected state here, I can make my choices and undo any choices that I no longer want to make my selections.